I remember the night it happened with a clarity that both excites and destroys me. The rain was falling hard against the windows, the house was dark, and my children were asleep in their rooms. I had told my husband that I was meeting a friend for coffee, but the truth was, I was standing in a hotel room across town, trembling with anticipation and shame. When he leaned in, pressed his lips against mine, and whispered my name like I was the only woman in the world, I forgot every vow I had ever made. I forgot the man who trusted me, the children who depended on me, and the God who had blessed me with more than I deserved. In that moment, I risked everything for someone who never truly loved me. Folded hands, before I dive deep into the story, I want to pause and thank every single one of you, my loyal subscribers, my family here on YouTube. You are the reason I share stories like this, because they are raw, real, and they remind us of the dangerous roads we sometimes walk. And to all of my new and returning viewers who have not yet subscribed, thank you for being here. I cannot wait for you to hit that subscribe button because it is the fuel, the energy, the heartbeat that keeps this channel alive. Please, do not forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. I read them all, and your words matter more than you know. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Emily. I am a 35-year-old woman, married for 11 years to a man named David. We have 2 children, a 10-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. From the outside, our lives looked perfect. We lived in a suburban neighborhood in Texas, with backyard barbecues, school runs, church on Sundays, and holiday photos that could make anyone jealous. But perfection is often just a filter. Behind the smiling pictures was a marriage quietly withering. David worked long hours as a financial consultant. He was steady, reliable, and faithful, but somewhere along I fed the attention, and it grew into a fire I could not control. It escalated quickly. Coffee after workouts. Late-night texts that I deleted before David could see them. Each step seemed small, but together they led me to that hotel room where everything changed. The night I crossed the line, I remember every detail, the way the room smelled of cologne and rain, the way my hands shook as I locked the door, the way my heart pounded as if warning me to stop. But I did not stop. When he pulled me close, when our lips met, when my body betrayed the vows of my soul, I felt alive in a way I had not in years. And yet, immediately after, I felt sick. I stared at the ceiling, my skin still burning, and all I could think was, what have I done? But instead of ending it, I dove deeper. The more I sinned, the easier it became to justify. I told myself David was too busy to notice. I told myself I deserved to feel desired. I told myself it was love. But it was not love. It was lust. It was selfishness. It was a slow unraveling of everything I once believed in. Weeks turned into months. I became skilled at living a double life, wife and mother by day, lover by night. Every lie made me sicker inside, but every kiss from Mark kept me hooked like a drug I could not quit. I started avoiding intimacy with David, making excuses about being tired. He looked at me sometimes with confusion, as if he sensed I was slipping away, but he never pressed. I used his trust as a shield to cover my betrayal, and that truth is the ugliest part of all. There were moments when guilt would choke me, when I tucked my children into bed and saw their innocent faces, when I watched David fall asleep beside me after working himself to exhaustion. But then my phone would buzz with a message from Mark, and I would be gone again, lost in the thrill of being wanted. I told myself I was falling in love. But in reality, I was falling apart. The chapter of my life that began with one night in a hotel room would soon spiral into something darker than I could imagine. Because what I thought was love would soon reveal itself as nothing more than a lie that nearly destroyed everything I once held dear. And the worst part? I would not realize it until it was almost too late. The deeper I sank into the affair, the more fractured my life became. On the surface, I was still Emily, the mother at the school pickup line, the wife who smiled beside her husband at church, the neighbor who waved politely during morning jogs. But inside, I was a storm barely contained. Every lie I told David, every excuse I made to cover my late nights, cut another crack into the foundation of my marriage. At first, those cracks were invisible. David was busy with work, juggling endless meetings and deadlines. He trusted me completely. That trust became the very mask I wore to hide my betrayal. But the thing about cracks is that they spread, and eventually, they cannot be hidden. It started with small things. Missed dinners. Forgetting to pack my son's lunch. Avoiding David's touch when he reached for me in bed. I told him I was stressed, tired, overwhelmed. He believed me, or maybe he wanted to believe me. But suspicion has a way of growing quietly, like a shadow in the corner of a room. Mark, on the other hand, was intoxicating. He knew exactly what to say to keep me hooked. You deserve more attention. If I were your husband, I would never neglect you. Words like poison coated in honey. I swallowed them willingly because they fed the emptiness I refused to admit. But as the weeks turned into months, his sweetness began to sour. He was possessive, demanding. If I did not reply to his texts fast enough, he accused me of pulling away. If I canceled a meeting, he pouted like a child. He wanted me when it suited him, but when I asked about his life, his commitments, or even his feelings, he pulled away. One evening, after another rushed encounter that left me feeling hollow, I asked him, "Do you see a future for us?" He smirked, kissed my neck, and said, "Why ruin what we have with questions like that?" That was the first time I realized I was giving my soul to a man who had no intention of giving me his heart. Meanwhile, at home, David was beginning to notice. He never accused me directly, but the silence between us grew heavier. He started asking subtle questions. Where were you so late? Who are you texting this much? I deflected with practiced ease, but I could see the doubt settling into his eyes. One night, as I was folding laundry, he came up behind me and said, "Emily, are you happy?" The question pierced me like a knife. I forced a smile and said, "Of course I am. Why would you ask that?" He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly, as if he wanted to believe me but knew deep down that something was slipping away. The guilt began to eat at me in ways I could not ignore. At church, when the pastor spoke about integrity and faithfulness, I avoided eye contact with anyone. Every sermon felt like a direct assault on my secret life. I sang the hymns, but the words lodged in my throat. One Sunday, my daughter drew a picture of our family during Sunday school. She ran up proudly to show me, "Mommy, Daddy, me, and Jacob. We are all together forever." I nearly broke in half. Because even as she held that drawing, I was already planning my next meeting with Mark. The turning point came late one night. I was in my car, parked outside the gym, waiting for Mark to arrive. My phone buzzed. It was David. "Where are you?" I froze. I had told him I was out shopping with a friend. My heart pounded as I typed back, "Still at Target. Do you need something?" Seconds later, his reply came, "I am standing in the kitchen. Your purse is here." My blood went cold. I had left my purse on the counter. David knew I was lying. When Mark finally slid into the passenger seat, grinning as if nothing was wrong, I could barely hear him. All I could think about was David at home, staring at my purse, realizing the woman he loved had become a stranger. That night, when I walked into the house, the air was heavy with unspoken truths. David was sitting at the table, the purse in front of him like evidence. He did not yell. He did not accuse. He simply looked at me with eyes that had once been filled with trust, but now brimmed with doubt. "Emily," he said softly, "do I need to worry about us?" I could not answer. My silence was louder than any confession. He shook his head slowly, pushed the purse toward me, and whispered, "I do not know who you are anymore." Then he stood and walked away, leaving me in the kitchen with my shame. But instead of ending things with Mark, I clung tighter. That is the twisted nature of sin. It blinds you to the obvious, convinces you that running deeper into the darkness will somehow save you. I told myself that Mark was worth it, that David would never understand me the way Mark did. But the truth was already unraveling. Mark began pulling back. Fewer texts. Shorter meetings. One night, when I pressed him about why he was distant, he laughed and said, "Emily, do not make this bigger than it is. We had fun, but you knew what this was." His words gutted me. I had risked my marriage, my family, my faith for what? For fun? For a man who never planned to love me back? Meanwhile, David's suspicions grew stronger. He started staying up late, watching me when I thought he was asleep. He checked my phone once when I left it on the counter, and though I had deleted the evidence, I could tell he knew something was hidden. One evening, he confronted me. Not with anger, but with heartbreak. "Emily, I feel like you are slipping away. If there is someone else, I need you to tell me." I looked at him, this man who had given me his loyalty, his years, his children, his everything, and I lied. "No, David. There is no one else." That lie sealed the coffin I had built for my own soul. But lies have a way of surfacing. And mine would not stay buried for long. Because while I was busy spinning webs, David had already started pulling at the threads. And soon, the entire truth would come crashing down in a way that would destroy me. The day everything came crashing down was not loud, it was quiet. Too quiet. It was a Tuesday evening. The kids were at my mother's house for the night, and David had asked if we could have dinner alone. My stomach twisted with dread because I knew. Somehow, I knew this was not just dinner. This was confrontation. This was Judgment Day. When I walked into the dining room, the table was set. Candles, plates, wine glasses. But David was not smiling. He was holding my phone. "I know, Emily," he said calmly, his voice trembling under the weight of control. My body froze. My throat went dry. My phone, how did he get into it? He must have seen the messages, the pictures, the proof of my betrayal. "David," I whispered, but I could not form the words to follow. His hands shook as he scrolled. "Do you know how it feels to read your wife telling another man things she never says to me? Do you know how it feels to watch you leave this house with excuses, only to see you pouring yourself into someone else's arms?" His eyes glistened with tears, but he refused to let them fall. I could not breathe. The truth was out, stripped bare, undeniable. For a moment, I thought about lying again. But what was left to protect? The mask was already shattered. "Yes," I said finally. "It is true." The silence that followed was unbearable. He dropped the phone on the table like it was contaminated. Then he looked at me with a pain so raw that it carved into my chest. "Why, Emily? Was I not enough?" I wanted to scream that it was not about him, that it was about me, my emptiness, my foolishness, my craving for attention that led me into the arms of a man who only saw me as temporary pleasure. But the truth sounded pitiful even in my own head. "I do not know," I said, my voice breaking. "I was lonely. I was weak. I was stupid." He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. He pressed his hands into the table and whispered, "You risked our family, for someone who never even loved you." The words echoed like thunder. I crumpled into the chair, sobbing, my hands covering my face. Shame wrapped around me like chains. The days that followed were worse than any nightmare. David barely spoke to me. He moved into the guest room. The kids noticed the tension immediately. My daughter asked why Daddy did not tuck her in anymore, and my son avoided asking questions, though his silence was louder than words. I tried to reach out to Mark, desperate for some form of comfort. But his phone went straight to voicemail. My texts went unanswered. After 3 days of silence, I drove to his apartment. When he opened the door, his expression was cold. "Emily, you should not be here." "What do you mean?" I asked, panic rising. "You said..." He cut me off. "I never promised you forever. You are married. This was supposed to be uncomplicated. But you turned it into drama." I stared at him numb. "Drama? I gave up everything for you." He shrugged. "That was your choice." In that moment, the truth hit me harder than anything David had said. Mark had never loved me. I was a distraction, a thrill, a convenience. Nothing more. I walked back to my car in the rain, my body shaking, the taste of betrayal bitter in my mouth. I had traded the loyalty of a man who loved me for the empty arms of one who never did. The weeks dragged on. David spoke only when necessary, his words clipped and cold. I could feel the walls closing in around us. One night, I found him sitting alone in the living room, staring at our wedding picture. "Do you still love me?" I asked, my voice trembling. He did not look at me. Love and trust are not the same thing. "I might still love you, Emily. But I do not trust you. And without trust, what do we have?" I broke down again. "Please, David. I will do anything. Counseling, honesty, whatever it takes. I cannot lose you. I cannot lose us. For the first time in weeks, he looked me in the eyes. And in his eyes, I saw both fury and sorrow. Do you realize what you have done to me? To our children? To this home? You burned down everything we built. I know, I whispered, tears streaming. But God can rebuild it. If you let him. It was not a magical fix. There was no overnight healing. But slowly, painfully, David agreed to counseling. We sat in that office week after week, ripping open wounds, exposing secrets, facing truths I wanted to bury. I confessed everything, not just the affair, but the emptiness, the selfishness, the pride that led me astray. David confessed his hurt, his anger, his fear that he would never see me the same way again. Some days he walked out of those sessions without speaking a word to me. Other days, he held his head in his hands and wept openly. But at least we were fighting for something, for us. One Sunday, months later, we sat side by side in church. I was terrified. Everyone in the congregation knew something was wrong. Rumors had spread. Whispers had circled. But when the pastor spoke about forgiveness, his words pierced me. Forgiveness, he said, is not pretending the wound never happened. Forgiveness is choosing to heal, even when the scar remains. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is strength. It is choosing love over bitterness. Beside me, David's hand trembled. Slowly, painfully, he reached for mine. For the first time in months, he held it. In that moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. Rebuilding was not easy. Trust took time. There were setbacks, arguments, nights of silence. But there were also small victories. The first time David laughed at one of my jokes again. The first time he kissed me goodnight without hesitation. The first time our children saw us holding hands and smiled like they believed we would be okay. I had risked my family for someone who never loved me. But by the grace of God, the man who did love me chose not to give up. David eventually told me, "Emily, I will never forget what you did. But I choose to forgive. Not because you deserve it, but because God forgave me first. And I want our children to know what grace looks like." That was the day I knew redemption was real. Today, I share my story not because I am proud of it, but because I know someone out there is standing where I once stood, tempted, restless, convinced that grass is greener on the other side. Let me be living proof that the cost of betrayal is far higher than you think. Do not risk everything for someone who does not love you. Do not trade loyalty for lies. Do not give away the treasure of trust for the scraps of temporary passion. If you have already fallen, know this. God's grace is bigger than your sin. Forgiveness is possible. Healing is possible. But it will take humility, honesty, and faith. I risked my family and nearly lost it all. But God, in His mercy, gave me a second chance. And if He could save me, He can save you too.